Lisa. It's so great to see you and hear you and have you on Rappahannock Radio today. How are you?
Oh, I am well and grateful and really happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to talk to you about so many different things today. I want to talk to you about your practice of Agnihotra and a little bit about what that means for our audience members who have perhaps never heard that word in their lives. And your journey to India and your to I guess start of Agnihotra, but also your experience with dances of Universal Peace and Sufi dancing. A full path, so there's a lot that I want to cover. Get lots of juicy stories. Radio is all about the tangents and going on take those. But you've been practicing since 72 or 73?
Um, 73 was when I started Agnihotra. There were a lot of things in the year before that led up to that.
Tell us a little bit about your journey into Agnihotra and how you found, or how Agnihotra found you.
That's definitely the case. So I was a teenager in 72 and I was pretty unhappy, usual typical teenage stuff, not getting along with my parents, not knowing what to do with my life, all this kind of stuff. And spiritual shopper. And I was living in a suburb of Baltimore at that time. And in many big cities at that time, all kinds of spiritual movements were cropping up. And I just had this restlessness to explore all these things. I was searching for something, didn't know what it was, but something was out there. So I would get on the bus. There was a stop right in front of our house. It led straight into the city, and I would go downtown and visit these different groups. The Hare Krishna people were there, the Theosophical Society was there, the Aquarian Age bookstore was there, all this, all these different movements and things. And yeah, okay, I learned some things here and there, but nothing really got me. Then, and this is such a all-around Robbins Barn thing that happened. It's really amazing that this happened at all. A health food store sprung up in my neighborhood, and this was not at all a good location. I lived in Towson. It would have made sense to have it near the university, but I was literally walking past it, probably every week. So I met some people there, and they told me about this, just a very informal spiritual group that was meeting out in Randallstown, Maryland. And one guy said, well, do you know Chris so-and-so? And I didn't know him, but I knew who he was. And they said, well, he comes to these meetings. See if so I, and he did, and I started coming. These meetings, people were talking about meditation and yoga. A lot of people were following Paramahansa Yogananda's teachings. So anyway, I would just go. And then about a year later, I was in September 73, Sri Vasant Paranjape came, and usually maybe about, 15 or so people would come to these meetings. That day, the room was packed. You could hardly find a place to sit down. These meetings were in an old farmhouse that a young couple was renting. And, I could barely squeeze in. And when he started talking, it was difficult to understand what he was saying because his Indian accent was so strong. But I just felt his energy. And I just felt whatever it is, this thing that he's talking about, I want that. Whatever he has, I want that. So some informal classes were arranged and so forth. And I got the supplies together and started. So the first time I did Agnihotra, I had a really overwhelming experience. And not everybody has a very dramatic moment. Some people really feel a big shift. With other people, it's subtle. Maybe after a week or two, they feel like, yeah, something's really happening here. So it varies. But for me, that day, I was annoyed because somebody from that group had mentioned something about Agnihotra the last time, and somebody said, I bet you haven't even started it yet. So that kind of gave me an attitude like, well, I'll show him kind of thing, you know. So I was annoyed about that I had just had an argument with my one of my family members. Our family was really under a lot of stress at the time. My father had been diagnosed with lymphoma, and which in those days they didn't have good treatment, so it was, you know, certainly a death sentence. And my grandmother, who was having all kinds of problems and beginnings of dementia, was living with us and made life very confusing. And so anyway, we were having a hard time. So I you know, started setting up, got everything together, lit the fire, said the mantras, put the rice and ghee in, leaned over, and I breathed in the smoke. And I just felt like this huge weight was just lifted. I felt this huge shift of energy, and I felt so elated. It was a shock. I mean, I had no idea. Nobody had said, "Oh, you're going to feel something really big," when you knew. Nobody had said anything about it. I just could hardly believe it. You know, I went into this, you know, with a bad attitude, in a bad mood, and suddenly, great. This was amazing. It was like I could hardly wait for, you know, we do this at sunrise and sunset. So I could hardly wait for sunrise to get up and do this again. Oh, this is great. So that was where it started.
Some that deep down must that you were going to have that type of, because I mean you saw your future teacher, you felt his energy and the vibration that you wanted, you know, to pick up on. So it's like, it seems like somewhere deep inside of you, though, do you think that you knew you were going to connect with it, right? Because I mean, nothing else had really resonated with you. Nothing else was speaking that way. And even though you were like, you know, it was a really tough time and you're, you know, having a bad day, so to speak. I mean, I don't know. It just seems so meaningful that how would you, you know what I mean? Some part of you said, stick with it. And do you think the energy that you experienced from, what was his name again? I'm sorry. When you saw him
Sri
sitting on the couch.
Vasant Paranjape. We just refer to him as Sri Vasant.
Okay, so the energy vibrationally coming off of Sri Vasant, do you think that he, like having that experience now, do you think he was able to send out that kind of energy naturally as who he is, or is that a product of his sacred fire with Agnihotra?
Well, since you know, he left the body in 2008, but I spent many years, you know, certainly in contact with him. He spent a lot of time at our home here in Madison, Virginia. And also I, you know, traveled some with him in different countries for Agnihotra work. So in all of that, I'd have to say I just saw him and experienced him as just like a clear pane of glass through which divine energy just came unobstructed. He had no ego, just this totally focused on service. He was so loving and kind. It really exemplifies, you know, the spiritual ideals that you can find in just about any tradition. Yeah, I mean, he just radiated that energy wherever he went with whatever he was doing.
Wow. The pane of glass through which energy is shining. So what was your experience after that? Like, again, you said you couldn't wait for sunrise to do it again.
Yeah.
This particular session, your first at sun, which simply you could talk about that a little bit, right? That it like a closing of one door and an opening of another. So then where did it take you after that first, you know, experience of elation?
Okay, well, I continued and I stayed in touch with other people who were doing Agnihotra, and for a couple of years, actually, I had some shared housing arrangements with other people who were doing Agnihotra. And then in 1977, Sri Vasant suggested that I go to India. and for the connection with the Agnihotra work. And looking back, I can see what a crazy idea that was at the time. But
Why was it so
when
crazy?
okay, well, actually, I just was remembering this. So this is me, this young girl. I was 22 at the time. I'm traveling alone in India. I have never been out of the country. I don't know the language. So, and I had very little money on me. I think about $80 at the time when I actually left. Although you have to understand that the difference of the economy in India and the economy here is vastly different. I mean, when I got there in those days, you could buy a long cotton dress for $7, beautifully made. Yeah.
Wow,
A
I'm not gonna
cauliflower
get
costs
that
12
here.
cents. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
So,
$80
but
for
it-
100% cotton.
Yeah, yeah. So the he presented was that I would arrive in Mumbai, and that someone would meet me at the airport, and I should bring a copy of the book Light Towards Divine Path. That's one of Sri Wasant's books, and we would at the airport put it up, and the other person would, and that's how I would know them. Now I don't know who is meeting me. I don't know a soul in India, and Sri Wasant was not going to be there to meet me. I mean, he was coming at some point, but so it's just, there I am. I'm going to land, very little money, no connection other than somebody in the crowd with a book, and I'm like, yeah, okay. And it all
Really had
went.
to surrender to the process.
I didn't. That's the thing. I mean, there was not a moment of doubt that I should do this. I mean, now I can think of 100 things that, to be concerned about. If my kids had said that they were going to do this, oh man. So, but it was that I just felt totally that this was what I should do. There wasn't the slightest doubt. I don't ever remember worrying for 1 minute about what might happen or what if the person doesn't show up. None of that. And everything did go just as he said.
Wow. So once you arrived there and you met the other, you're matched with the book there. So where were you? Like, so you went onto like a bus? You got into a little taxi? I mean, where did you take
Well,
first?
okay.
Your first date? What did you do?
Okay. Well, actually, the person who met me was Gabrielle Massil, who was originally from Germany, and actually some Rappahannock people will know her. She has a lot of friends in Rappahannock. We've been friends all these years. She's now my next door neighbor.
Oh, cool.
So she's always been connected with the Agnihotra things too. So we went to some we were in touch with a lot of people who were doing Agnihotra at that time. And actually, a lot of that time that I stayed with those people in their homes. So it wasn't like spending for hotels and that kind of thing. Very low budget travel. But most of the time I was going to be at a house that was rented by the man who later became my brother-in-law, Powers. And a couple other Agnihotra people were there. And Gabrielle was staying there too. And we were working with very poor people. And we would go to the villages. When I say poor, of course, poor here and poor there are two different things. But the people we worked with were called Harijans. And they were like the lowest working class in the Indian caste system, which officially, but you don't just do away with centuries of tradition overnight because somebody passes a law. So the Harijans were highly discriminated against. They had the heaviest labor, the hardest jobs, the worst pay, all those kinds of things. So we would go to their villages and we were teaching the people Agnihotra. It started, my brother-in-law went and started teaching the children, and they took to it very readily. And then a very interesting thing happened. A huge problem in the Harijan villages was alcoholism. because the men have, such brutal, heavy labor jobs and all the stress is very high. So a lot of the men drank. And alcohol at that time, I don't know how it is now, but then it was very expensive. So if a man gets paid twice a month and he blows a good portion of the income on alcohol, this is devastating to the family. So the children start doing Agnihotra, and the fathers are experiencing stress relief, and they stop drinking. So this was a tremendous benefit to the families there. So then I was following up. We had some children's classes. We would teach them Agnihotra, do Agnihotra with them, and then teach them some little simple things, some songs, games, whatever, very informal things. But they loved it. And these children were not being educated. Sadly, I saw the school. There was a hut. There was a chalkboard. There was no chalk, no paper, no nothing. There was a guy who could come and he could teach. He had had some education and he would just show up and do what he could, but he had nothing to work with. So any little thing that we could teach them, and they learned a little bit of English from us and stuff, they were all for it. And we made Agnihotra ash medicines. Well, I shouldn't call them medicines, really, they're like home remedies. We distributed them to the people. At that time, it cost the equivalent of 12 cents to see a doctor, and the Harijans did not have 12 cents to spare for a doctor. So we would go into the villages with these Agnihotra ash home remedies and give them to people, and my brother-in-law, David, would record the results. And in every case, there was some improvement. In many cases, there were complete cures, including this one elderly woman who had been diagnosed by a doctor as having a cancerous growth, and she applied the Agnihotra ash ointment. It was a mixture of the ash and ghee, clarified unsalted butter. And the growth opened and drained, and it eventually healed. Wow. So we had some very amazing experiences there. Once we went to a village, and skin disease was really rampant because there was so much water pollution. I really wonder if there were any kind of restrictions on the chemicals that companies could dump into the water. It was really pretty horrendous. It didn't look that way, is all I can say.
And it's like the beginning of like sweatshops and stuff there, right? So it wasn't getting...
Well, you have very crowded conditions and things too. So it's easy for, things to spread. So we saw a lot of skin diseases. So at this one village, there was a mother carrying a babe in arms, and had all these sores on the skin, around, even inside the mouth. So we left the Agnihotra ash remedies, and we came back, it was a month or two later, and I had kind of forgotten about that. And then this woman comes up to me, and she's just smiling and smiling. She has a baby in arms. I didn't even recognize the child. The healing was so complete. I was just really amazed. So it was an experience to be able to share this with people. And, I was very grateful for the time that I spent there to be able to do these things.
So, well, I have two questions with that. So, how long were you in India that first time?
That first time, a little over 9 months. And I would have to say it was divine grace, again, that I stayed that long, because it's just really funny. First, okay, you're there for 3 months visa. Then if you want to extend it, this is tourist visa, you can normally get a 3 month. You can normally get a 3 month. After that, it's not looking so good. Though we did have a friend in Mumbai, the same people that I stayed with when I first arrived, just before I went out to the center. And they knew that, they had some connections in the government that could, kind of smooth the way. So I forgot to mention another crazy part of the story. Ticket. Don't try this at home, kids.
On one hand, I've done that a couple times actually. On one hand, it's very nice because, if it turns out it's not going well, you quicker turnaround than say you'd gotten, a ticket back in like 6 weeks and you're like, oh, I really want to leave sooner than that. So there's that, but then there's also the positives. If you were, thoroughly enjoying your time, you have no, date to which you have to return.
Yeah.
But I can see
Yeah.
how that would be, now you being a mother and, and an adult being like, what the heck?
Yeah. So anyway, what happened, some friends in the States were supposed to be sending my return ticket, and it just hadn't come. There was a house in Mumbai where the mail for some of the Westerners who were visiting and doing the Agnihotra work, there was one house where all the mail would be sent to, and then it would be, distributed from there. Sri Vasant got his mail there as well. So kept checking and checking, and my visa is about to run out. So a Dutch woman who was also more experienced in travel said, well, all right, I'll go with you to Mumbai, and then we'll see what we can do. And we went to those friends, to stay with those friends who had a connection in the government. Well, when we get there, it turned out that my return ticket had gotten mixed in with Sri Vasant's mail. It'd been sitting there. But when I went to the airline to book a ticket, they said, we can't get you anything until after your visa expires. A week. Well, okay, so I said, well, go ahead and book me on the soonest flight you can get me, and that's, well, what else can I do? So we did that. So I go to the visa appointment, and I told him what had happened, and that I couldn't get a flight out any sooner. And the guy kind of huffed and puffed, and show me your ticket, So, I reach in, he's like, okay. So I don't know if he even believed that I had it or not, but just that I reached for it, then he was satisfied. So the really great thing was that Sri Vasant's teacher was coming to Mumbai. And this was a huge, holy event. I can't even begin to tell you. Just told you how I experienced this tremendous energy, this holiness, this purity, this boundless love from Sri Vasant. Well, his teacher just magnified. I can't even put into words. And so people would flock. It was a special occasion. I don't remember which one it was. But a lot of people were coming. There was in Mumbai, and so people were going to be coming to see him and everything. So anyway, it was a fantastic finale to my time in India, to end with that, and so many people coming and to have that wonderful experience. So that mix-up allowed me to have that time.
Absolutely. It sounds like it was all very meaningful and meant to be.
Well, that's one thing that has certainly been my experience down through the years of things being, divinely guided. It certainly looks that way to me. One thing Sri Vasant used to always say is, don't believe something because I tell you or because it's written in a book. Believe your own experience. And that's really what I've had to go by. And people sometimes ask me, well, how can you do Agnihotra all these years? Aren't you tired of it? And it's like, I wouldn't want to stop doing something that I love and that I feel so much benefit from and that I enjoy so much. And I see how much it helps other people, because I've been able to share it with people all, down through the years. And I've been to so many other countries too, and have, both for teaching and learning as well, and meeting these other people and hearing their experiences too. So, it's just nothing but gratitude that, I've been able to keep doing this.
That's beautiful. It's interesting that someone would say, aren't you tired? Because it's not. I can understand, I guess, I don't know. I guess I don't understand that comment. No, I don't understand that at all. But so the other thing that I'm glad you're still doing it and then you've had these incredible experiences that I wanted to ask you is, so what was it like then coming back to the States after being in India for 9, almost 10 months? You must have been like, culture shock when you got back. Like,
well,
what are these
first you
people
have
even doing?
Yeah. Well, first you have to understand the shock of going there. And I can truthfully say it took me 4 months to get over the culture shock of the poverty that I saw there. I just had never seen anything like it.
And you grew up
that,
in a city, so it's not like you hadn't
well,
seen poverty, but I mean, so tell us a little bit. You said you'd never seen anything like that. Like, what did you see?
yeah. Well, there were people who were living literally on the street who had like maybe some bamboo woven mat propped up on sticks of bamboo and then a little piece of cloth across. This is set up on the street. And there's a family living in that. There are people bathing at a common well. It's really weird. They're taking a bath with their clothes on. That's how they're washing their clothes. I mean, there are people, that's all they have to wear is what they've got on. Oh boy. People, all kinds of diseases and disfigurements and things like, that we would address in this country, that we have the means to provide health care. You just would not see these kinds of things like what you would see there. And begging, oh boy. It was pretty shocking because there were, at the time, beggars were so rampant, and actually they were somewhat organized. It was kind of I don't know how you say it, but it was like a systematic thing. There were certain groups that would beg in certain areas. They had their territories and things. This was just part of the way of life there. And they, I mean, here in this country, somebody could be charged with assault if they put their hands on you. Nothing was going to happen there. They would yank on your clothes, yank on your arm as you're walking, trying to walk down a children coming up and doing that and looking in your eyes and their hands outstretched. That's pretty rough. Yeah, really rough. So, yeah, that was so it took me 4 months to kind of get a. And one thing I will say about the Harrigens, the people we were working with, they would never beg. Even if we came and they saw like our suitcases and things, which would be huge wealth to them. I mean, they could sell that stuff on the black market, in a heartbeat. Never, ever begging, never asking for anything like that. They had
Why
that
do you think
dignity.
it was a dignity thing, or it was
I do. I think it was their own integrity. It was their values. They were the lowest working class, but they were workers. Their lives were very hard, but I just believe that's who they were.
wow. So,
Oh, so back to the States. Oh,
yeah.
I never got, yeah, sorry, I kind of go off. Yeah, everything just seemed so materialistic, and I became so aware of the wealth that we have and how we are so fortunate to have clean running water, electricity, all these things, a house that has heat, all these kind of things. I mean, I grew up in a row house. It was suburb, not city. But my father was a car salesman. I would say we were like lower middle class. And my mother worked part-time in a drugstore. But to have what we had, a refrigerator, wow. I mean, these things were,
You
they were
probably had
not
your own
common.
room.
Most of the, well, yeah, so I had one sister. At one point we shared. At another point I had my own room. Yeah.
But to imagine just everybody living behind like a bamboo, tent flap on the side of the street. I mean, that's a pretty depressing image.
Yeah. And I mean, a typical Harrigan home was a mud brick hut that had been whitewashed and a corrugated metal roof and a door. And there would be just like an opening, not a window or anything, but openings cut. And they would sleep on grass mats, or maybe they would have what's called a rope bed. It's kind of like a hammock on a frame. I actually did spend the night once in a Harrigan home. You lay the grass mats on the floor, and there's like an order of who sleeps next to whom. I was sleeping next to the wife and one of the kids, I think, maybe one of the daughters. They had their pots and pans, maybe a change of clothes. I'm not so sure, but yeah, that was it. There's no furniture.
So I want to ask you a little bit about, so this practice that that you learned through finding or through reading of Sri Wasant, did he come to the States to spread that knowledge and to try and like, gather folks to bring it back to India? Like, I mean, I'm guess I'm curious a little bit about like the intentions that he had, because it's originally the practice is from India. So he came to the States, brought the information here, and then is bringing, carriers of that information back to India to spread it again there. Because I guess obviously the knowledge had been widely lost through through the ages of time or something. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, first, I have to explain that this knowledge. Actually, I have to make a disclaimer. When I'm talking about Agnihotra, I'm talking about a very specific practice. There are many, not what I'm talking about. And maybe I'll talk a little bit more about exactly what this constitutes. And you may have seen in the little video clip of me doing the fire. But anyway, this Agnihotra that we teach comes from the Vedas. And Vedas are the most ancient knowledge known to man. But Vedic knowledge at one time was all over the globe. It was not the province of any one particular group of people or any one country. You can find Sanskrit tablets and stuff. They found some in Russia. And people find words in languages all over the world that come from Sanskrit. Sri Wasant was in a Scandinavian country, and he mentioned a Sanskrit word for like angel or light being. And the people said, oh, that's the same word in our language. So this knowledge is universal. But at the same time, as you said, Kaya, this knowledge was lost. These weren't ceremonies. These were techniques. These Agnihotra and other homas, which means purification through fire, specially prepared fire. These were techniques to harmonize the functioning of the planet, to keep things running in harmony in creation. And the knowledge was lost, remnants remained. But Sri Wasant's teacher was the one who revived this ancient practice after all these years, and also presented the irreducible minimum, because there are many, many different types of Vedic fire ceremonies, and some are extremely complicated that only the smallest handful of people on the planet would even be capable of doing. But this was something that he said the everyday person could do for his or her benefit, and that it's so needed by the planet, and that this is what's going to undo the effects of pollution. And when we say pollution, there's many aspects to that. The physical pollution, thought pollution, energy, subtle levels of energy as well. Okay, so Sri Wasant was given the mission to carry these teachings to all the people of the world. And he started, I guess, in either 72, he made some initial contacts here in the US, but I think maybe in 73 things really took off. And I was very lucky to kind of get in on the ground floor when that was happening. So it was kind of interesting that you could find people in India who would say, oh yeah, my grandfather used to do this, or, my relatives did this, or, well, they may have done some sort of fire ceremony or some remnant or some kind of thing about fire, but not this specific thing with these particular disciplines. As I said, we're working with exact sunrise and sunset. That's a discipline in itself. If anybody had told me I'd be getting up before sunrise back when I was a teenager, I wouldn't have believed that. No way. So yeah, you're right. In that sense, Sri Wasant carried it from India to the States, and it just spread. He was never seeking to acquire followers in any way. It was just, he came, he presented what he had to share, and people were just either they were drawn to it or they weren't. But in many places, just Agnihotra groups would spring up. In Germany, a group came up, and in South America and, really all over in different countries and on the different continents. Different organizations just kind of spontaneously arose.
Tell us a little bit more about the actual discipline of Agnihotra and how you, so you said you don't consider it necessarily a ceremony, right? It's a way to, it's a practice to keep, the harmony of energies, the harmony, keep things in balance in this world. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay. So there are three inputs to Agnihotra. In the little video clip, you saw the little copper pyramid, and I was in there. So we have the materials that we use, and we're burning just 2 pinches of whole grain rice, and it's mixed with a little bit of clarified unsalted butter. And the other material is, of all things, dried cow manure, which actually you can find in virtually all traditions of folk medicine. There are many healing uses for cow manure, and it has some very special properties. There are indicators that it has protective effects against harmful radiation. So the materials, so we've got those materials, the rice, the ghee, and the cow dung. And we have the copper pyramid. And pyramids, of course, I mean, back in the 80s, it was very popular to do experiments with pyramid-shaped objects. They found that fruit stored in a pyramid-shaped vessel would stay fresh longer than, other kinds of vessels. So there's something special about this pyramid shape. Okay, so those are the materials. Then we have the timing, which is exact sunrise and sunset. And the sunrise-sunset biorhythm is said to be the most powerful one that affects man. And there's a flood of subtle energies that comes to the place where the sun is said to rise. So we've got that special energy that's coming in, we're harnessing that. And at sunset, that energy recedes, so we're doing purification at that time to offset that imbalance that does occur. Anybody who works with Alzheimer's patients will tell you patients become more agitated and disoriented, and it's actually called sundowning. So there's a change that happens at sunset. A lot of people, if they have a virus, they feel worse. You have a cold or something, many feel worse right around sunset. Well, there are many kinds of harmful bacteria that increase their growth rate around sunset. So by doing purification at sunset, we're helping to neutralize that happens. So we have the materials, we have the timing, and then we have the vibrational input in the form of these Sanskrit mantras. And Sanskrit is a language of vibration, and we're using these special vibrations. There are some vibrations that exist everywhere. So when we chant these mantras, this is striking the atmosphere in a way that it's creating certain vibrational effects. Where there's vibration, there's sound. Certainly in science, it's well known that different vibrations have different effects on living things. Many years ago, people were doing experiments with plants. If you played certain kinds of music to plants, they would grow better. If you played certain kinds of music to cows, they would give more milk. So it's widely known that different vibrations affect living things. So we're using the vibrations of these mantras to effect on the atmosphere. And it's this combination, the flood of energies coming from the sun, the timing, and the materials, the qualities of the materials. Together, all of that is producing a change in the atmosphere. And there's one more thing I'm just going to quickly mention, and it's about how Agnihotra has an effect on the mind. Because people might say, well, how does burning this stuff affect your mind?
Wait, Lisa, can I stop you for 1 second? The light in this room got really, really dark, and I've been trying for a second to be like, when do I have a good place to stop her? And usually this camera will add a lot of light afterwards, but I don't think it's going to add that much more. So let me adjust that really quick.
Okay.
Yeah, usually I'm like super washed out in here, and now it was like, I guess it's about to storm or something. So I'm like, it's looking very ceremonial in here. But The important thing is that we're getting what you're saying. So that's, and
Okay.
your beautiful telling of it. So go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay. So people have asked me many times, well, how does, burning this stuff, how does this make an effect on the mind? How does it change the mind and reduce tension on the mind? And this ancient knowledge says that there's a link between atmosphere, prana, and mind. And when I say prana, I mean the life energy everywhere and connects us with the cosmos. And this ancient tradition says that, well, we can make a change in the atmosphere and this will change the prana, and then that gives a push to the mind. So when the pollution is intense, then this is having a negative effect on the functioning of prana. It's said that the functioning of prana has been disturbed. So by purifying the atmosphere through Agnihotra, this harmonizes the flow of prana, and then automatically that gives a positive push to the mind. And people find it easier to be calm, to make better decisions because their mind is more clear. This can have very wide range.
And clearly you felt that the first time you did it, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, every time I do Agnihotra, I always feel at least a little bit better than I did going into it. Sometimes the effect is very dramatic, and even after all these years, it's especially, if there's been a particularly stressful or upsetting day or some incident or something, it can be a very strong difference between before Agnihotra and after, even after all these years.
wow. And then you had another portion that you were going to mention about, well, actually, I want to ask you, since we're talking about the practice revolving around the sun and these sort of gateways of energy between sunrise and sunset, or not between, but at actual sunrise and sunset, is there anything said about Agnihotra, like, say, during the summer solstice? Like when the sun is at its most powerful? Do you do something special, extra special ceremonially or practice-wise during that time?
Well, actually, the equinox day is the most important day to do Agnihotra.
Oh, really?
There is some very special effect from
So
that.
not the solstice.
I don't know why, but there is something that we've all been urged to, be sure, especially for people who only do it occasionally or whatever, if you're only going to do it once in a while, really try to do it on that equinox. I can't really explain why, but it is a time when, your day is kind of, the day and the night are equal.
So on both spring and fall, both equinoxes.
I've heard it especially for the fall, but I don't really remember about the spring. I don't remember anybody saying it, but certainly the fall has been emphasized. And I don't know if that's just just something that didn't get passed on about the spring, but I know it has. It's definitely true for the fall, and we make a real push for that.
Did Sri Vasant, so his teacher arrived the knowledge when like timeline wise, just guesstimation, when around, what time period, like what years are we talking, did his teacher start reviving this ancient knowledge?
In the 1940s. And he was never interested in calling attention to himself or collecting any followers, and his ashram was a very obscure place, not anything famous.
It's just about the knowledge.
Yes, exactly. And the same with Sri Vasant. And, because this knowledge is for everyone. This knowledge it belongs to all mankind. And there are people of all walks of life, all different religions who practice it. I heard of an Amish farmer who does it. There are nuns in South America who are practicing it. I know Buddhists, people of the Jewish faith, many Christians of all different varieties, and people of no particular, spiritual orientation. So it's really open to all.
And as a little bit of a side note, because I want to get back to my question on there, but you also, you maintain that as a teacher of Agnihotra. You do not charge for it. It's not supposed to be an exchange, of money. It's simply supposed to be about the spreading of the word, spreading of the knowledge of Agnihotra, right?
Absolutely. Agnihotra is always to be taught free. I mean, because how can I sell you something that's yours? This
Yeah.
belongs to you. And also, it's an opportunity to be of service. And it's been a tremendous joy throughout my life to teach this to people and then see, oh, wow, I feel so much better. Or, different health issues sometimes just clear up when people start, or in conjunction with these Agnihotra Ash home remedies. So it's been just a real privilege to be able to share this. I'm always grateful for the chance to share this with anyone.
Yeah. A positive experience through doing so, and the everything you've given, it seems like you've gotten at least, tenfold back, which is a beautiful experience to have. Which I know we can talk more about, and I want to if you do, but I want to ask you if you know, if you know anything about your teacher's teacher and how he found that knowledge. Like, I mean, I guess it's kind of worthless to ask how did the knowledge get lost to begin with, because it's like if we knew how it got lost, then we probably know a lot more about it. But it's just so interesting how something so healing and so positive that, I mean, you yourself, I mean, you have such a great, you're just one person who's practiced it, and you've touched so many lives and it's had such a positive effect on your life. So it makes me ask the question, like, why was it lost, or why was it hidden, type of thing, which I don't know if you can speak to that, or if you have any thoughts or feelings on that.
Well, I have read that people, I guess you could say, put their own 2 cents in. Also, there is a book that explains a bit about it, and that originally Agnihotra and other Vedic fire symbols for any flesh and blood offering. There's never any violence associated with that at all. But then in the course of time, people changed their dietary habits and started putting animals in the fire. So they're eating animals. This will be a sacrifice. This is at least one aspect of it. I can't
Right.
just, but I have certainly read of this. And that then there were spiritual teachers who came to stop the flesh and blood offerings because they felt that this was detrimental. So for a while, these fire practices kind of died out. And then, I guess to speak about Sri Vasant's teacher, it's just that, again, just as I said, Sri Vasant was like a clear pane of glass, and this divine will is simply coming through him. Well, even more so, his teacher. This is when beings like this are so highly. I was so very, very fortunate to spend a very small amount of time in his presence, and it's totally overwhelming. I can't even put it into words. That kind of holiness, that divinity.
Wow.
It's really just unbelievable. So these beings, when they're that highly evolved, they're just coming here to perform a task. They come here just that one could say that Moses, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad, that they all came to fulfill a task. So that's really all I can really explain. I can't really speak more about him.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. That makes sense. Talk a little bit about, or a little bit more about, and you started mentioning it when you talk about prana, but about the fivefold path, if you go through that.
Yeah.
for us.
So, Agnihotra is part of the first aspect of the fivefold path. This is, you could say, a summary of the Vedic teachings, a very concise, simple summary, which was really a gift to mankind. You don't have to wade through stuff to really get the essence of the Vedas and make use of these teachings to improve your life. So The first aspect of the fivefold path is yednia, which means purification of the atmosphere through specially prepared fire. And Agnihotra is a type of yednia. There are other yednias as well. So that's kind of establishing the foundation. And a lot of people find that it has many many people find their health improves from doing Agnihotra. They feel less stress. People may also find it has a catalytic effect on the events in your life. Any issues that might be stuck start to move. Actually, I did Agnihotra with a young woman in Rappahannock a few months ago, and then I saw her again last month, and she said just sitting for that one Agnihotra, since that time, she felt that some of the issues in her life had begun to shift, some things that were stuck. So, so there's, well, I can say that Agnihotra is a very powerful good karma. So it can put some good things, some positive things in motion. Okay, so it's working on many different levels to bring about harmony. Plus, you know, how it's supporting plant life and balancing things in the environment. I can talk, there have been some simple scientific studies. We invite research. Anybody who wants to do research with and support that. And some universities have participated. They've done some studies on biodiversity, and they find that in areas where Agnihotra is done, there's much wider biodiversity. Then there are things like they've done some tests with certain pollutants and measuring before and after Agnihotra and finding that the amounts were less. Initially, of course, there would be an increase when you're burning something, you're putting particles into the atmosphere. But after that time, then still the number went down, lower than what it was to begin with. So it's undoing these various effects of pollution, many different levels. Okay, so that's yednia.
And you,
The second
sorry to interrupt on that, but you've also,
Okay.
I mean, in the past, I've seen some pictures of, like, for example, I can't remember if it was sweet potatoes or yams. I know they're sort of closely related, but like this ridiculously abundant harvest. That's like,
yeah.
that I think has some connection to what you
Yeah.
do with Agnihotra.
Yeah, well, yeah, we've been gardening for many years, and we have grown our own sweet potatoes from our own plants from sweet potatoes. So we're growing rather than buying them new every year. So these were like maybe 5th generation Agnihotra sweet potatoes, because we use the ash when we plant. We do Agnihotra in the garden a fair amount, not really on a regular basis, but you know, when we can. And then last year, my son and his partner Joanna were spending a lot of time here, and they overhauled our garden and they put in box beds. So we had these deep box beds first time instead of our hard clay Virginia soil. And they said that for box bed gardening, you might get 6.5 pounds per plant. We got 20, 21, 25 pounds per plant. I mean, we could hardly believe it ourselves. It was ridiculous. It really was.
So you gave
So-
some of that away, right, to this part of the
We're
cyclical.
still, yes, we're
still
still
giving
eating
them?
them. Still
wow.
eating them, still sharing them. Yeah.
Wow.
So, okay.
That's amazing.
Well, so anyway, that kind of leads into the second aspect of the fivefold path, which is called dana, which means sharing in an aspect of in sharing your assets in a spirit of humility. So this means this is different from just regular charitable giving. Disciplines to be observed. So one, we preferably do it privately. So there's no ego gratification. There's, you're not even looking for thanks. You're just doing this because it's your obligation as a human being to share. Then also to give to a proper person. If you give money to somebody and then they spend it on drugs, or, if the person turns out to be an alcoholic and they're just self in deeper and deeper into addiction, then that is not dana. In fact, you participated in something that has harmed a person. So we have to use some judgment about to whom we give. But you can give to a rich person, you can give to a poor person, you can give to a person who needs necessities of life. You can always do that in cash or in kind. So yeah, it's that privacy. There's not to be any ego, and you do it without looking for anything in return. That this is my duty as a human being. I'm consuming, I'm using things all the time. Then I receive things, and I need to share part of what I receive. And what happens when we those disciplines, giving to the right person, not looking for any thanks, and not having any expectations, what people experience is that some return comes from that. Some material benefit comes. You can't look for it, but it's been the experience that people's needs start to be fulfilled without a special effort, or financial problems can start to lessen when a person does this. But a person could start by, when you get a weekly paycheck, just put some of it aside, and no matter what happens, you don't touch that money. That money is going to be for a practice of dana. You might not know who you're going to give it to at the time, but once it's set aside for that purpose, you cannot touch it again. So it's this habit of making it a habit. And so Agnihotra and dana together are forming this foundation for prosperity. So harmonizing our life in this material realm. We all have obligations. We have our physical material needs. And this is a tremendous aid to finding peace in the material world for that. Because it's really hard to make spiritual progress if you're, desperately worried about bills and finances and all this. Everybody knows that's a huge stress for so many people today. And especially, with this pandemic that we've all been through, that's had tremendous economic impact. So these are things that, and it doesn't have to be a huge amount, even starting small, but doing it correctly, it definitely brings results. So those two things are kind of clearing the way for the next part, which is tapa, which is self-discipline of body, mind, and speech. And this is a way of strengthening the willpower. And it's said that the tapa brings about fruition of your affirmations. And what this means is that it's going to help your will to develop, and to help you to manifest those things which you believe to be to be beneficial in your life. It's a way of harnessing your power. Certainly, we all know if our habits are dragging us down, we all know that we all have things to work on. And in tapa, you decide yourself what you're going to work on. It's not for anybody else to judge what you should be working on. For some people, it might be diet. For some people, it might be lessening time on, the screen, or, the media kind of things. It might be tapa of speech. That can be a great one, of watching what we say, of trying to be more positive with our speech, to avoid complaining, or, whatever. There can be any number of things, but we all know we all have our various issues. It might be needing to exercise more, whatever, but you decide for yourself. And Sri Vasant used to say, choose the minimum of discipline, but follow it scrupulously. And I bet, even if you start a small tapa, like, oh, okay, I'm not going to eat so much dessert at night. Okay. You may bet that somebody's going to come along. They just bought a half a gallon of ice cream. All of a sudden you will be tested. I can vouch for this. As soon as you set a limit, there's going to be a situation where you're going to be tested, and it takes that exertion of willpower. And it's partly lessening that consciousness of the thinking that I am the body. Who am I? Who is the real person? Who's really in charge here? So this is about strengthening the will and getting ourselves in shape, purifying the mind. And some of the writings talk about crocodiles, that desire, envy, greed, attachment, pride, so those kinds of things that, they don't make us happy. Anger, happy. Pride, greed does not make us happy. These things. So we're working on those things also in tapa. but the individual decides. And then that leads into the fourth aspect, which is karma, which nowadays I think most people karma means. So actually, in the Vedic sense, there's three aspects. There's karma, which means good action. There's akarma or akarma, which means bad action. And then there's vikarma, specific allotted task of an individual, like your purpose in life, what you're really here to accomplish. And if you do that work, then that speeds your spiritual development.
So that talk about like instant karma versus like your karmic body. Do you know what I mean? So
not quite.
So at least in my generation, there's a lot of like use of the word karma, like say you were being really selfish in a scenario and then, you know, that backfired on you. Like a lot of
karma
people
comeback.
my age would, yeah, like they're like, that's your instant karma, you know, like you threw that frisbee in a negative way and it came back and hit you in the head type of thing. And then, you know, I've had a lot of conversations with people, especially recently, well, they'll be like, well, that's not the real definition of karma. You know, it has to do with really what you've done in past lives versus, you know, how you were reincarnated here and what your journey is to be as a soul overall and all, you know, your overarching journey throughout all of your lives. But what you're saying is that there's both, right? There's karma that can come in this life from what you do in this life and karma from what you do in this lifetime. But then there's also your spiritual karma here as an individual.
Yeah, well, it takes some discipline to actually discern what your V-karma is. So when you actually are trying to practice some self-discipline and get yourself into shape, starting to pull in your power and take your power, then it's, you know, that's like there's needs to be some purification, is what I'm saying, to discover your true mission in life. For most people, you know, from what I've observed, you know, it takes some work to really hit on what it is, you know, that's your task in this world, what you're really in this world for, what is what brought you here, what is the purpose. And yes, I mean, not everyone who does Agnihotra or follows Fivefold Path may believe in reincarnation. I personally do, but certainly we observe this reap as you sow cycle, and this is what we're referring to. So what we want to do in the Vedic sense, we want to do, you know, good action, and also here again, not be attached to the results. If anybody thanks you, if anybody thinks it was the right thing to do, if everybody agrees with you or not, that's not the point. You are doing what you believe is the right action at that time. And without that attachment, then that also helps us transcend the effect. There's nothing binding you. If you're not looking for some thanks or some result or something, then that action isn't chaining you down. It's more freeing. So, and then that leads to the last aspect of the Fivefold Path, which is Swadhyaya, which is self-study. And this is discovering the true self. Who am I? Who is the real being, or who is the soul? You know, we say my head hurts, my finger is cut. Well, who is the being who owns the hand, the body? You know, discovering the true self. Yeah. So finding the true self. We know the body will pass away at some point. Well, is there something that stays beyond that? So, and people go at Swadhyaya in different ways, reading different scriptures or practice of meditation, and also observing the actions of our own mind. Observing if, something, suddenly we feel angry, we feel upset, you know, observing, watching the thoughts that go through and how things are changing again and again. So by observing, then it's like we can take a step back and become less attached to these thoughts so they don't have such a hold over us.
So, and I think I've asked this before. I don't
during this session.
But there seems to be aspects of all five Agnihotra?
Yes, that was a very good observation. And our teacher used to say that if one is doing Agnihotra, he is actually following the fivefold path because, of course, it's Yajna. And Dana, we're making the offerings of the rice and ghee. It is a tapa, it is a discipline, a self-discipline to get the materials together, get up before sunrise, and to do this. It takes a little discipline to learn this. I mean, I can teach a person Agnihotra in like an hour and a half, but still, you had to put out the effort to learn it. It is,
You're
as I said
constantly
before,
learning, too, right? It's not just like, oh,
yes.
I learned it in one session and that's it. That's all I have. My cup is completely full.
Well, you can learn how to perform it.
Okay.
And we'll have his or her own experiences with it. So, but
Right.
yeah, I could definitely teach you how to do it. It's not something that takes, years of study and, read a lot of complicated stuff. It's just not like that. Yeah. And of course, as I said before, it is a powerful good karma. You're doing something that's benefiting the earth, and we have studies that show that. Tremendous benefit to plant life, gardening, farming. That's very well documented in the Agnihotra work, I mean, by independent sources. And because Agnihotra is helping you to become more still, more calm, it's conducive to meditation, and it's conducive to swadhyaya, self-study, of going within and finding the true self.
Yeah, absolutely. It's bringing in the talk of, and I know be careful about the wording because you don't want to any proclamation that you're healing or medicines or I think you use the term remedy. But I'm curious if you've ever made soap with the ash, since ash is, I mean, part of the, the original ingredients of soap. And since it seems to be very good for, especially for topical ailments, if you've ever made soap out of the ash.
I personally haven't, but a friend of mine in India was doing so. And he actually left some kind of rougher parts of the ash in, so it was kind of like an exfoliating thing too.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see how that would be very helpful. Yeah, I mean, when you start thinking about, I think on the surface level, some people, which you've probably experienced, right? So in some form or another, at some point in your practice where people are like, cow dung and ash. Instead of being like, well, it's burning at like what thousands of degrees, what level?
600 degrees. I don't think you're going to find bacteria hanging out at a temperature like that. None that I know of in any case. So, yeah, I know back in the day when I first started doing Agnihotra, I mean, there was no literature, not in English, about this. People thought that was really crazy. But now there's so many things. People have, the world has shrunken. So there's all sorts of spiritual practices and stuff. And nowadays there's so much weird stuff around anyway that, this doesn't stand out particularly.
They're like,
and actually yeah, no biggie. And when the cow dung is dry, it doesn't smell either. So that also makes a difference.
Why cow dung? Like cows specifically.
Okay. Well, it has some special properties. As I said before, from all over the world, you can find folk medicine. They all have uses for healing agent. And the cow is said to be a very special animal in any case. In India, it's revered. And I've even heard of things where there's something about the rays of the sun that are hitting the cows and they're out all the time, that there's something that also is playing a part in the process. And consider what the cows are eating. They're eating all this grass. They're eating all these plants and things. There appears to be some effect, protective effect regarding harmful radiation. After the Chernobyl disaster happened, we heard from friends in Europe that they were importing areas that were highly affected by radiation. And we also found out later that I think it was in Ukraine, where they had huts that had been built. This was very, very old school, but using cow manure as part of the construction. You know, there's different mud things and whatever, using different natural materials. Well, apparently there's some procedure where you use cow manure, and they found that those huts remained after Chernobyl, where other places had contamination. So
Wow.
there is something special about that. We have a little bit of information about Agnihotra and its protective effect with radiation. If you have time for this story, I'll try to make it quick. A
No,
friend of
please.
mine, okay, okay. Back when Chernobyl happened, a friend of mine had a farm in Austria, and she had been doing Agnihotra at her farm for some years, and maybe some other related Vedic fire practices. And then after the disaster, all the farms were required to submit samples of milk and fodder for radiation testing. And when the results came back, they said, you know, all the other farms around you had contaminated levels, but yours were just showing normal background radiation. Are you doing anything special at your farm? Well, she'd been doing these fires there for years. And it's just really unfortunate that those government officials didn't look further, considering the problem that harmful radiation has become in the world today.
Right.
Then in 2014, and I'm not getting the name of this university right, but maybe it's the University of Science in Ukraine or something university, but anyway, it was the university in Ukraine. I'd have to look it up to get the right name exactly. But they got hold of a sample of highly contaminated rice from Fukushima, and they mixed it in a solution of Agnihotra ash and water. And within 2 weeks, the radiation level came down from highly contaminated to background levels. So we were very interested in those results, and we would love to see more experimentation. Agnihotra has just gone as a grassroots thing. It's just gone person to person.
Yeah.
There's never been any big money backing it or anything like that.
It's probably for the best, but still. I mean, things, you know what I mean? Things can get really easily, I don't know if the, not the word can just, things can change energetically when you get big money backing it, as you know. Not that there shouldn't be more support and more research into it, because clearly there's something. I mean, well, how can you separate the spiritual from the physical? You can't, but obviously you've experienced the physical and the spiritual aspects of it. And, you know, so there's definitely room for further study there, both just in the general world of science, both the physicality of like what is going on with the purification of the fire, what is going on there, you know, in this, it's kind of like an alchemy type thing, but then there's also something going on spiritually there. So, and you could probably argue, because of that spiritual aspect and the meeting of the physical aspect, like a psychological aspect going on in there as well. So, I mean, I would absolutely love to see more research on it, especially with the radiation. I mean, as you said, unfortunately, a huge problem in our world. And, you know, so it's so good to hear that I remember you do it, I know you practice it at home and you teach it, and you've been teaching Zoom courses, especially during the pandemic, but you've kept that going. Also, we're both employed at the school at Hearthstone School. You would do it every morning and every evening that you were there to help, you know, purify, to help start the week. And that also leads me into something else was so energetically purifying is the days of world peace, which really helped to start a Monday morning like that. To get everybody, you know, into their, you know, bring that energy, you know, focus it down into what we're doing. Okay, and now we're here, we're present, we're at school, but we're not, you know, throwing, you know, a quiz at you to start. We're actually dancing and singing something, you know, in a communal fashion to get everybody in tune with their surroundings.
Okay, I have to back up just a bit. Just for the record, I usually wasn't doing Agnihotra at school. That was a supplemental fire. So
Okay.
Agnihotra establishes the basic healing cycle. That has to be done right at sunrise. This was the time I got to school. So then these other fires strengthen that cycle. So, but
Okay.
they certainly, all of them are, all these fires, enliven and purify the atmosphere. The Agnihotra is more powerful. But
And
I did the fires there at Agnihotra if I was there at sunrise or sunset.
so it doesn't necessarily, the supplemental fires don't have to be in the same space as when you did the Agni. You can bring that energy with you or no.
Yeah, and well, actually, Agnihotra can be done in different places too. It's going to have the strongest effects wherever it's in the immediate area, wherever it's done. And we also have a fire temple here, maintain that along with a couple. But anyway, we were getting on to talking about dances of universal peace. And actually, that was by design. I requested that we do Agnihotra first thing Monday morning for that very purpose, just as you described, so that whatever the kids had experienced over the weekend, you could see it. Sometimes I'd see the kids walking in, coming up from the parking lot, slouched over, looking down at the ground. Whatever happened over the weekend, it did not look good. In many families, where there's a divorce or separation, there's often a changing of the guard. They might have been with one parent for the weekend and now another during the week. And, making that transition sometimes was not easy for kids. And just starting off Monday morning, just getting back into the routine is not so simple. So the whole point was, before we even try to do anything with academics, let's just come together and harmonize our energy a little bit, and try and uplift a bit. Dances, we're singing often sacred phrases from many different traditions around the world: Native American, Hindu, Christian, Jewish, Sufi, many different ancient traditions, indigenous traditions. And we're moving together. We're often holding hands, but there's some physical contact. So often we're looking into your partner's eyes or the eyes of the people you pass. So we're connecting, we're coming together. And even just singing together, I think, is a very powerful thing. And when you're singing sacred phrases, some of these phrases have been chanted and sung for centuries, and we connect to that energy. And I was really very, very humbled by witnessing children, the power of children singing these things, because their innate purity, I think, allowed them to be like these pure transmitters for this higher energy to come through. And sometimes I was absolutely blown away by the energy that I felt by the end of the session. And
Yeah.
it was a great privilege to be able to do that together with everyone. And it was never about advocating any religion or anything like that. I don't think anybody ran out and changed their religion because they, did dances with us. But I think it's a good thing in this world. The world is shrunken. We have communication with people all over the world in our daily lives with internet and all of this, the media forms. And I think to be able to get a little familiar with other cultures and other people's words and beliefs and things, I just a little bit more awareness. I think it helps us to be a better global citizen in today's world.
Yes, absolutely. Because, I mean, as you said, the world has shrunken, but at the same time, it hasn't changed. So it's like there's still a lot out there. And I think sometimes people, as it shrinks to, the size of your your phone, it's easy for people to forget that there's still a lot out there, and there's still a lot of knowledge, and a lot of ancient knowledge that has value. And, we don't need to just turn completely away from that just because we're into, the technical age. But I want to ask you, how did you is there a point where you're in your story where Agnihotra and your study and your travel with that met with the dances of universal peace? Like where's the overlap for you?
That's a good question, and nobody ever asked me that before that I can think of. But there was an overlap, and I felt that I needed more joy and upliftment. Like I love my Agnihotra work, and that is a great source of joy. There's also a great deal of work. Time has to be spent on computer, answering emails, and all these kind of tasks that need to be done, practical tasks. And I thought I needed something just to balance my life. I needed another aspect of upliftment. And a friend of mine had told me about dances of universal peace that were being held at the Unitarian Church at that time in Charlottesville. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. Let me just go and check it out. We had a women's group, an Agnihotra women's group, which had really, due to the pandemic, we haven't gotten back together, but I hope we'll start that up again. And we would always sing together. So I thought, well, if I go, I can learn some songs that would be appropriate, some uplifting things. So I went, and this was the November after 9/11. And there were maybe 70 people there, and very diverse group. And I felt as if I walked into an ocean of unconditional love. It was a very powerful experience just coming in to join these people. And the energy was tremendous. So it was really a fabulous dance leader. It was really a wonderful experience to be able to be present in those dances. So I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but I guess, it was 2004. And I didn't know anybody. I simply came, danced, left. That was it. I wasn't conversing. I would keep silence, really, because the energy of the dances was so powerful. I really didn't even want to get to that intellect, the thinking mind. It was just more moving in the heart space. And in 2004, I asked the dance leader, I said at Hearthstone School, we were going to have a Thanksgiving celebration. And I thought it would be nice to lead one dance just to bring everybody together. Could you tell me, give me some pointers? So he explained, and we did that song, Spirit of Peace, which I thought was very appropriate. That was the first dance we ever had at Hearthstone. And I liked it. And I kept coming back for some, additional pointers about things. And then one night, it was towards the end of the evening, so maybe there were about 50 people left. He turns to me and says, "Lisa, you want to lead a dance?" And it was one of those deer in the headlights moments, I just about had heart failure because at that time you could hardly swing your recycled grocery bag in a circle without hitting a dance leader. There were so many dance leaders, and he's asking me, but it all kind of flashed before me. I thought, this is something that can uplift people. I'm going to go for it. I felt like if I said no, I was shutting a huge door of opportunity. So I was terrified, but because you have to sing and and then also they had musicians there. I had to direct the musicians and signal when you're going to end it, or if you want them to speed up, if you want them to slow down. And I had no experience doing that. Well, anyway, I bumbled through it, and from informally then,
discipline right there.
it was a very mortifying. I can say humbling, or I can say humiliating, whatever you want to, however you want to look at it. So anyway, I kind of cringed at the memory, but I was really glad. And then that leader would occasionally, he was so mischievous. Oh my gosh. It's like he would lead a dance that I was really, more familiar with. And after that, he would ask me to lead something. So I couldn't use up the one that I was well prepared for. I had to come up with something else. So this was his way. He did this with other people too, I found out. So that started me on my way. And I just kept attending dances and, accepting what training, I ended up getting a mentor, but that was much later in the game. So I did become a certified dance leader, mentored dance leader. But it was such a tremendous experience. I was so sorry with the pandemic when the dance circles weren't meeting in person. Now in different places
Yeah.
they are starting up. As far as I know, they haven't started in Charlottesville yet, but a really blessed circle of people, really a beautiful, beautiful community.
Thank you
Oh,
for
but anyway,
sharing
you
that.
asked about the, well, but I know I'm all over the place today, Kaya.
No, you're
Uh,
fine.
but you did ask about the connection with Agnihotra. My feeling was that this would be something beneficial to the Agnihotra people. We could use in different gatherings for upliftment, and I did some of that. I certainly did way more at school. So, and I don't know that in the future that might be something that comes up as well. But, and in some events, there's some very special international events that were held in India at an Agnihotra center. And I was asked to lead dances of universal peace there. And Sri Vasant was very much in favor of this also. I think he saw that unifying power, that uplifting power of that.
Yeah. So it's you're so fortunate, so blessed that you have such a strong meter or compass for that energy, because and throughout all these tales that you've told, there's these moments where you're like, okay, wow, like this is where I'm supposed to be. And I just think that that's so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, but also that you have that. I just wanted to take a moment and honor you for that, because that's not something that everybody is in tune with, and that even before all of your the self-reflective and spiritual work that you've done through Agnihotra and the fivefold path and following that, it seems like even at a young age, at what was it, 17, you were, in tune at least with that aspect of, your energetic meter, like your compass of like, wow, this I'm resonating with this, and I'd like to, this is something positive for me, so I'm going to go for that. And then that leads me into thinking that I don't know enough about Vedic traditions or practices to know if this is technically a thing in there, but it me with it once I mention it. But it seems like the overlap that I hear from you, just as as a listener and as someone that's known you for a little while now, that there seems to be something that you carry, and I think all individuals have, but not everybody ignites it. But it's almost like this internal flame, so to speak, this energetic flame that you carry with you, that you awakened and really got in touch with through Agnihotra. But then you continued that with the dances of universal peace, and it's like it's almost an internal mirroring of what you do with Agnihotra and the physicality of that. But that's what you choose to do here at your path, like your life path spiritually. Like you ignite that flame in yourself and help to grow that, and glow glow up, so to speak, with other people. So I don't know if that's a term, or like a thing where you carry a flame within you. Is that a thing within Vedic practice, or am I just totally hippieing out here on
Well, I wouldn't speak maybe specifically to that term, but certainly these Vedic practices, all these aspects of the fivefold path are about getting in touch with the true self, your true soul. And these disciplines, it's not just discipline for the sake of discipline. It's because it's purifying. It's pulling away the layers, or burning away the layers.
Right.
Actually, tapa, the word tapa means to heat.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and what that means, there is a friction. When you say, oh, well, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, there's that, then you got to, push. There's a friction, there's resistance, there's part of you that doesn't want to, and that friction, that heat there is part of the process where we're burning up the impurities that are not the true self, that's false ego, the things that are not who we really are, that are not that love that's within. So yeah, I guess you could say that.
Well, I really appreciate your time today, and for all of the sharing that you've done, not only with me and our audience, radio today, but just also with the people in this realm that you've come in contact with. And I'm just, I'm very thankful to know you and know a little bit more about your story. I wanted to ask you though, if there's anything else you wanted to add or talk about, or something that you feel like, I know I hate being put on the spot like that too.
Let's see.
Anything
Oh,
else?
no,
And
no,
then
that's okay.
in
Well,
15 minutes, you'll be like, yes.
yes, of the last 40 years of experiences. Well, actually, well, a couple of things I just wanted to clarify about Agnihotra is that I said it is open to all, and it's like there's no obligation. I mean, sure, you get the best result if you do it every day, sunrise, sunset. But if a person even just wants to do it once, teach them, or there's some people who just do it occasionally. So there's no requirement or obligation in that regard, I kind of did want to mention just a few really amazing experiences. This one, I never really made the connection. So after I came back to the States, not too long after that, Richard and I got married, and now we have a house that's just walking distance from the Fire Temple. We were asked to maintain that, which is a place where Agnihotra is done every day, twice a day, sunrise, sunset. And if we personally can't do it, then there are a few other people who live within walking distance who will do that, so that is maintained consistently, day in, day out.
That makes me have a question for you though, because it's related to the temp. So how did you end up then in a community? I mean, obviously you were gravitated again, your compass, your meter went off and was like, I need to be here. But so there's an actual, I mean, you live, kind of over near Madison County, right? We don't need to reveal exactly where it is, but have a community that has built a temple. I mean, in Madison, how does that?
Okay. Well, actually, that temple was established in 1973, and various people were in charge of that. It kind of shifted back and forth. Various people came and went, as often happens in different organizations and things. In 1981, Richard and I were living in Madison, and then we were asked to take on that responsibility, and we did. So the nonprofit organization owned the building. That it was an old farmhouse that serves as a temple. When I say fire temple, that's something very specific in this tradition. It's a place where Agnihotra is done every day, twice a day, sunrise, sunset, and silence is kept all the time except for certain Sanskrit mantras and verses. So there's never any conversation in there. It's simply a place people come to attend the fires or to perform them. They can sit in silence if they want to practice meditation, or if they just want to sit there. It's up to the individual. Nobody's going to come up and try to teach you anything. It's just open to people to come, and they experience what they experience. And some people have had very dramatic experiences when they sat in the fire temple. So it's an energy point. And that place was chosen by Sri Wasant. He was guided to this particular place.
Wow.
We were told that in ancient times there were highly spiritually developed people living in this immediate area. So there was a reason for this being here. Let's see, where were we? So okay.
I didn't know that temple, sorry to take you off track there, but we had done this interview before, and it, for different reasons, it was unusable. And I remember thinking then that I wanted to ask you about the temple, and I'm so glad I asked you about it now, because I didn't realize that it had been there since the 70s. And I also didn't realize that one of the reasons was because I guess it was ascertained energetically that this was a place where, like you said, highly, how did you put it? Highly spiritual, highly evolved beings were gravitating towards. And then to add to that, it's funny when you come in contact with a lot of people in this general area, not just in Rappahannock, but in the surrounding, where they're like, I was just drawn to the area. I've heard that from you, from Lori Marshall. I've heard it from Teresa Boardwine, healers, teachers of all sorts that are like, I had to come here. And so I wanted to put that out there. It's like that makes sense now. It puts a piece into place to the overall puzzle of what I've been hearing my whole life of growing up in Rappahannock and in this area. So thank you for
Yeah.
providing that piece.
Yeah. So anyway, we ended up building a house walking distance from the temple. And over the years, various people bought properties, close to the temple. So there's a handful of households here of people who do Agnihotra.
That's
And
special.
together we do that. So Agnihotra is maintained every day, and normally 4 hours of a supplemental fire is also performed. So Agnihotra establishes the basic healing cycle. The other fires strengthen the cycle.
Okay. What's the so obviously you want to have at least the two, the dawn and the dusk, but how many like recommended supplemental fires, or is there a fire burning in the temple all the time?
No, people come and we try, as I said, normally we get 4 hours of the supplemental fire done. So people usually come for 1 or 2 hours at a time. So you're chanting and putting ghee into the fire for, however long.
Wow.
There was there was a really amazing experience I wanted to share because you were certainly noticing how circumstances were falling into place and people were being guided, how I experienced, certain things just led me to a certain thing. Actually, one thing I didn't mention this time was the first time I went to a class with Sri Vasant. He started giving classes. After that first time of meeting everyone, some informal classes were set up at this house in Washington, D.C., and several other people were in this little group with me. And when I walked in, he was sitting sort of like in a chair in the corner, and then there were several chairs in front of him for us to sit on. And I felt as if all my life I had been like bobbing along on this stream or river or something, and it led me to right there to that corner where Sri Vasant was sitting. Like, yep, this is it. This is where you were heading all this time. It was very strong feeling.
Again, you're so in tune with that. That's a special.
Well, one
special
thing,
gift to have.
I think that sometimes dramatic experiences are given as guidance. If we're truly, sincerely seeking guidance to try to pursue the highest and best in our lives, if we're seeking it, I believe guidance will be given. And I think sometimes special, even what we might look like miraculous experiences, can be given just to reaffirm, yep, this is it. This is the right place. This is where you're supposed to be going. One woman called us when Richard and I had first started selling the Agnihotra supplies, and she called up and she was going to order whatever you needed to get started doing Agnihotra. And she didn't really know anything about it, and I had to explain to her just what she needed, what were the essentials. And she said, she told me what happened. She said, I had a dream and I saw this man and this little pyramid thing and this fire. And she said, I didn't know what it was. And she said she told her friend about it. And her friend said, oh, that's Agnihotra. You better start doing that. So that was a pretty dramatic experience for her. I mean, she just,
Yeah.
I don't know what this thing is, but it looks like I've got to do it. So she did.
Wow. Again, all these beautiful connections that you've made through the practice of sacred fire there. I'm so happy that you were able to have those and to be able to share in the community and beyond with that, and share with my community here at Organic Radio. I appreciate that.
I've just really been overwhelmed by, the grace that I've experienced, and I just want to help others to experience these wonderful things as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will put a link when this is up so everybody can get in touch with you. But agnihotra.org, is that where?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, people can find you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, and they can again study for free with you if they're interested. Are you open to, if anybody just, I mean, maybe they're not sure if they want to study, but they just want to ask you some questions about it because they're
Sure.
potential, they've been, thinking about it, and a light bulb has gone, a fire has been lit in there somewhere, and they're thinking about it. But so you're open to questions and
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks again, Lisa. I really appreciate you having
Oh,
time to
oh,
talk with Rappahannock Radio today.
oh, thank you so much. It's been wonderful.